Why is Nike still using air? This is a question I see over and over on the internet, comes back every couple years, because I think the assumption is that the technology of Nike Air isn't any different than it was 45 years ago when Frank Rudy first pitched Phil Knight in his office about the air bubble idea. Or the air that we're running in now in 2025 is no different than what was in this shoe, the Nike Tailwind back in '78, or this shoe, the Nike Air Max 1 from about 1986-87. But the technology has really changed, and Nike is really innovative in this space, even though they still do like to shoot their product photos with backlighting, as you can see here with the Air Max 1 ad, or here in 2019 with the Alphafly 1, or most recently the Pegasus Premium, all backlit. But even though they like the same product photography, the technology has changed pretty drastically, and it's actually quite exciting. The reason Nike is innovating with Air, and yes, they are innovating with Air, is really down to three reasons. And the first one is that it is a uniquely Nike technology. It is proprietary to Nike. Just like every other brand wants their own proprietary technologies, Nike has theirs. And honestly, Air is as synonymous with Nike now as it really is with anything. So it's a perfect sort of marquee technology, which you've heard me talk about on this channel before in other brands, for Nike to really lean into. But there's another reason, and it's this. Air is Nike's separator in the footwear industry. No one can create cushioning innovations like we can. And that's a very important idea, that the technology is uniquely Nike. It separates Nike from everyone else. Again, marquee technologies. Every brand wants it. Air is Nike's marquee technology. And yes, there are brands, there are other shoes that have an air bubble in the heel or the forefoot, but that's the older technology from 40 years ago or more. It's not the current level of air zoom that Nike's really pushing in innovation in running shoes and basketball and everywhere else that they're using the latest generation of air zoom technology. The second point, and I think this is probably the biggest point because this is really what Nike cares the most about, is performance. Nike sees the Air technology, specifically the Air Zoom, as offering more resilience, more energy return than any other cushioning technology that they have. And we've seen these figures. You know, you have your classic EVA foams, which give you about 60 to 70% energy return. You have ZoomX, which gives you 85 to 90%. And Nike is saying that with the Air Zoom technology, they can get over 90%, sometimes much more. And that is probably the primary reason that they're really pushing forward with innovation in Air, is because it gives them the most ability to innovate cushioning systems where they want them to go. And the idea of systems is really important, and I think this quote really gets into that. In running, when we combine Air with components like midfoot plates and with platforms like our proprietary foams, we create superior systems for performance. And it's that last point of the quote that really, I think, is the important thing to pay attention to. Superior systems for performance. Now, Nike looks at their midsoles, really what they call the engine of their shoes, as a system. It's not just about the foam or the plate or the air unit or whatever other materials in there. It's about how those materials all work together to give you a specific type of ride, whether it's training or racing or something in between. And I do think Nike has a slightly different approach to how they do their midsoles than the rest of the industry. The rest of the industry is really focused around foam or the stiffness of a plate, but Nike really is tailoring how all those components work together. Again, other brands will do that, but I don't think they do it to the level that Nike does. And I think when you put technologies like Air Zoom in there, that gives Nike a very specific edge over really what everyone else is doing. And the last point, and I think this is one that I rarely ever hear anyone talk about, is that theoretically, Air Zoom will last forever. It's durable. Now, when we're getting into all these very high-end, very airy super foams, we're seeing those super foams fail after, 100, 150, 200 kilometers. They don't last very long because foam, the more airy you make it, the more lightweight, the more resilient you make it, will eventually start to pack out. And we see this time and time again. Now with an air zoom unit in a shoe, theoretically that first kilometer should feel the same as the 500th kilometer, as same as the 1000th kilometer. Frankly, the rest of the shoe is going to fail or fall apart before the air zoom unit should fatigue or fail in any way. It's not that the air zoom unit won't fatigue over time. It will, but in the lifespan of a shoe, what a runner's going to use it for, even a runner who's putting, 1,000 kilometers or more into their shoe, which, nowadays that's kind of harder to do, it's still not going to fatigue or fail or even change in that kind of shorter lifespan of a shoe. If we're talking 20, 30, 40,000 kilometers in a shoe, which no shoe is going to withstand that, then yeah, maybe. But that, I think, is another very specific advantage that Air Zoom actually has, is that it won't fatigue, it won't pack out, it won't change. It will be consistent through the life of the shoe. And what I find really interesting is if you look at this ad from 1988, and this is one of the early Air Max ads, the pitch in this ad is specifically around that point, around the durability, around how the cushioning lasts forever. So from the beginning, Nike has really been talking about this, but I think even more so when we're in these really specialized, really delicate super shoes that we have now in 2025, this idea, I think, will have even more value as we move forward into next-gen materials. Another thing I find very interesting about Nike Air is that until this shoe, the Nike Alphafly 1 in 2019, the Air story was about cushioning, more about shock absorption than really anything. It was about comfort and making it more pleasant to run and log a lot of miles. The idea of resiliency or energy return for Air, or frankly really any cushioning technology really in any shoe, was something that people didn't really talk about. The first brand to really talk about that was Adidas with Boost, and then there were a few early Air Zoom units where it was about energy return, but it really wasn't until the Alphafly 1 where the story of Air became energy return, and that is purely and squarely where we are focused now in 2025. And looking ahead with Air, I think it's really fascinating because Air is used across really every vertical of Nike right now, not just running, it's really everywhere. In fact, last summer, they did a whole campaign around Air, around the Blueprint colorway pack that was released, really highlighting the Air technology and really any type of shoe really that was used for any Olympic event that Nike athletes were in. So it's across everything, and it was really fascinating to see Nike lean into Air again in an advertising campaign because they really hadn't done that in some time. And when you look across all of the different Air units, they are continually evolving them. They're continually pushing them. They have something like 500 patents around the Air technology in general across all the different types of Air that they use in their shoes. Specifically to running, I think it's also a really interesting time for runners because we have been focused a lot on the Alphafly and how that's evolved with the two AirPods, which were there initially for the energy return and resiliency, but they are also pods to save weight because that is one of the drawbacks of Air right now, is that it is heavier. But then we saw the super spikes of the Maxfly and the Victory, which are now Maxfly 2 and Victory 2. And most recently, that's turned into the Pegasus Premium, which isn't everyone's cup of tea, but I think it's a really fascinating shoe that is actually quite fun to run in and actually quite unique. There's nothing really like that. And that sculpted Air unit that you can see here on the medial side of the Pegasus Premium is really fascinating because that is Nike showing that they can do that sculpted technology now. Now, in the Peg Premium, it is big. It is a little bit over the top. It is heavy, I will give you that. But it's fun, it's unique. And when you really think about combining the Air Zoom technology with that curve, which Nike learned from carbon fiber plates and the Vaporfly, the Alphafly, all their plated shoes, you really can imagine where this technology can go. I don't think the Pegasus Premium is the final stop for this sort of full-length Air unit. I think we're going to see this evolve. I think you're going to see it get lighter. I think you're going to see 3/4 length ones. I think you're going to see 4-foot length ones. I think you're going to see implementations of the Air Zoom with that curve in places you didn't expect it to. And it's all going to be there for performance first, because that, I think, is really where Nike's focused with what I've talked about a bunch on this channel, their current innovation supercycle. And I think this line really sums it up. Air is a window into Nike. It's a story of constant reinvention and never-ending progress. And that reinvention is really the essence of Nike. How many times over the years of the company has there been a reinvention of the brand? They're going through one right now in early 2025. It's a pretty big one, actually. And I think putting Nike Air at the forefront of this, at the forefront of their innovation and how they're just trying to progress forward, is really quite smart. And I think it's quite interesting. And that's why I think Nike Air is as relevant in 2025 as it ever has been. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you find this content useful, consider subscribing. You'll see more content from me pop up in your feed. If not, drop a like on this video because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.